I'm Steve Pleich, and I'll be your host for this evening's edition of Voices from the Village. Tonight we'll be talking about ReelWork 2015, May Day Labor Film Festival. This is really an exciting event that everybody looks forward to in town, and actually in the Tri-County area. We'll talk about that later. The series of films really with kind of a social and economic justice themes to them, just wonderful. I'm pleased to have with me Camille Walker. Camille, welcome.
Thank you, Steve.
Jeffrey Smedberg. Jeffrey, welcome. And Dr. Jennifer Colby. Jennifer, welcome. Camille, let's start us off and tell us a little bit about your role with the film festival and just a little bit about your engagement with that.
Well, this is my 4th year with ReelWork, and we're all volunteer organizers. It's a completely volunteer-run festival. It was started 14 years ago as a fundraiser for some union members who were retiring, and it was a successful event, and they've just been doing it over and over again every year, and so now here we are in our 14th year. And you know, it's totally community-based. We get spaces donated by many different places around Santa Cruz, as well as Monterey and Santa Clara County. And it's an opportunity for us to highlight the forgotten history and culture of the labor movement.
Of course, yeah. And it's interesting, I was mentioning before the show began that I don't know as much as I would like to about the film festival and certainly its history and whatnot, but as I was looking through the brochure, it's amazing the number of different venues that you have and the fact that it's in Monterey County, it's in Santa Clara County, and in Santa Cruz, and I just didn't know that. But Jeff, tell us a little bit about the logistics of kind of putting this kind of a thing together.
Right. Well, as Camille mentioned, that this is our 14th year at it, and it's kind of amazing looking back how we managed to get it organized each year, all on volunteers. Now it's a little easier because we have some history and we've figured out a few ways to do it, and so we can, oh, how did we do this before? We have a small group, an organizing committee of anywhere from 6 to 10 people that starts meeting about December or maybe January, and we meet every couple of weeks, and we invite in people who are interested in films about social justice and working people, who have a particular focus, who may represent some organization in town. And so our core group sets up the structure for a film festival, and then we'll have people who come in and want to host a specific event, and then they take some responsibility for picking a film and finding a venue and getting some volunteers to help do that, and they do maybe a little fundraising on their own. And
terrific, yeah.
And the core group takes care of some of the larger logistics, some of the main fundraising, and printing our beautiful programs and doing advertising.
Right. And Jennifer, Camille, and Jeffrey and I, of course, know one another from various things in town, but you and I have met this evening for the first time, so welcome. You are a teacher at CSUMB, and so tell us a little bit about your work out there and your engagement with the film festival.
Sure. Being someone who saw the value of labor history for my students at CSU Monterey Bay, I had come to Santa Cruz Festival, and I thought, you know, why not bring this to the Monterey area? And I'm active in the California Faculty Association, which is the union of our faculty throughout California, all the 23 CSUs. And in the way that we connect with labor is through the Central Labor Council. And that connection really gives us an opportunity for solidarity. So we had been involved in a number of solidarity activities, and through that I just like, okay, this is a great way to connect with people in Santa Cruz that might be in the same union, but also through the film festival to bring, you know, some live action films that really show history or present struggle. And so because there's a core group in Santa Cruz, and we, you know, the most fun is actually reviewing the films. That's the most fun.
I should think so, yeah.
And then just being able to take those, I'll duplicate a film showing in the Monterey area that people in Santa Cruz have chosen because the films are great, or maybe have a unique film for that area.
And just so folks know, and we'll certainly mention this throughout the program, the festival starts April 19, which is a week from tonight, and it'll run through May 3rd. So a host of films, and we'll be talking about several of them. But let me hasten to say that this is a live call-in show. So if you have a question for any of our panelists, please feel free to call us at 425-8848 extension 30. And I've got a gizmo right here that's going to put you right together with our guest. Camille, we were talking earlier about, and unfortunately we don't have a trailer or clip for Pride, but you were talking about that film in particular. Tell us a little bit about that.
So it was a film that was previously shown at the local Nickelodeon theater here, and we're lucky enough that they've, again, donated their space. They donate every year, and we're able to bring it back. And it's a film about an LGBTQ group in London that supports a Welsh miners' strike. And we are collaborating with the Diversity Center, so we collaborate with many other community centers here in Santa Cruz. And they're going to come, and the Triangle speakers are going to do a panel.
Absolutely.
And this is the second time I've collaborated with the Diversity Center for ReelWork. The first time was actually here at CTV. We showed a film called Out at Work. And it was a great experience, and I remember talking to the other people at the Diversity Center. You know, we'd love to do this again, is what they told me. And I said, I don't know when I'm ever going to get another labor film that also has to do with the LGBTQ community. And then lo and behold, this year came out this feature film called Pride. So I'm really grateful and feel lucky that we can work with them again and that we're able to show this film again.
And this is one of the fascinating things to me about this film festival is that the various films are hosted by the Diversity Center. The Triangle speaker will be there with the other films are hosted by some other folks. It adds a wonderful richness to it, I think, that you wouldn't otherwise get if you just kind of went and saw a movie and you say, geez, that was wonderful, and you talk to your spouse, your significant other, your friends, and you've seen the movie. This is really something special that they do. Jeffrey, you had something you wanted to mention that I don't think got into the brochure, but you were mentioning a presentation.
Right. Well, the first show that in our schedule, in our lineup this year, is going to be next Sunday on April 19th. And we just made the arrangements late and it didn't get into the main program. It is featured on our website. Learning from El Salvador, which was a film made last year by a local filmmaker from Boulder Creek, Bob Gleiner, and he traveled to El Salvador with some other local people, and I mean he is a very experienced filmmaker, has made films for PBS all over the world, and this particular one is very timely at where we're showing it on the UCSC campus. We're showing it right at the end of a weekend conference put on by the Salvadoran University Students Union. In Spanish, the acronym is USEU. And they're having, for the first time, they're hosting the statewide conference from Salvadoran students from all over the state. And they thought it was a good fit. And so right at the end on Sunday at 1 o'clock at the Merrill College Cultural Center, we're going to be showing Learning from El Salvador. And so here's a case where the filmmaker will be present. Why do we do a film festival when it's so easy to get films on, watch them on YouTube or download them from Netflix? The reason is that there's we think, a richer experience if you see a film with a group of people and then have a chance, not just go out into the blinding daylight afterwards, but take a moment to think about what we learned in the film, have knowledgeable people to speak about the making of the film or the context, the struggles that were portrayed in the film, and then we always try to make a linkage between that struggle portrayed in that film. Sometimes, very often, they are about historical events. And how does that relate to conditions here locally and struggles that are going on right here? And then we try and help people get connected to the local struggles and become active in pursuing whatever the struggle is here.
And I think that's particularly valuable because in Santa Cruz, having been an activist with Camille and many others over time, it's difficult to get the students to engage. And I think if you can bring something to them that really piques their imagination, their interest, their energy, and kind of engage them in that, then you really have something that is, as you say, has the richness to it that you might not otherwise have. Jennifer,
Right. This one, of course, being shown on the campus. We hope that it will attract a lot of students, but of course it is open to the public. A little difficulty getting to campus and finding parking maybe, but the bus system is good. Bus system is great. You don't have to worry about parking.
Yeah, absolutely. Jennifer, we were talking earlier, actually with Ken Nobler, and our director this evening has been involved with the Film Festival over the years, Ken. And he was saying that the showings in Monterey are primarily your work. So tell us about how you do that, how that comes about, you know, what you have to do to make that happen.
Our California Faculty Association is one of the unions. A lot of the support for ReelWork comes from different unions. So getting different unions to volunteer people, but also funds to support this film festival is crucial. And I, for example, have Mandala is a film that we have this year. It's about music in South Africa. We have a professor, Karen Davis, who has this film class called Movie Mania, and her theme is about social justice and music and film. So this is perfect because it's about how music transformed the life of people in South Africa as they came out of apartheid. So that's one example. We have just the opportunity to bring, I mean, I bring it to the campus, and then we've experimented with different venues in Monterey County as well, like the National Steinbeck Center.
You were saying, yeah.
So that it works to really engage people. You know, we've had you know, it's ReelWorks May Day, so May 1st. Often we have an event like some level of protest. It's really a day that immigration has been looked at, and so we've kind of tied the film with some of the activism that's happening on campus and in Monterey or Salinas.
Yeah, and I know that we've tried in town over time and to kind of raise some awareness around the labor movement. It's very difficult, I think, sometimes, and to have an event of some significance on May Day, and be it just kind of maybe a march down to the theater where one of the films is showing, or some expression of solidarity with the workers, I think, is extremely important. Why don't we look at a couple of, please, Jeff.
Well, I was just going to say, this might be, since we brought up the May Day,
please.
Camille, I think you were going to give us a little history about why we
The fact that we
May Day
have the word May Day in the title of the festival, you know, in the United States, not many people know May 1st is International Workers' Day, and it's celebrated and known throughout the world, but somehow forgotten here in the U.S., and we recognize that, and so we really wanted to highlight that fact and bring more awareness to it. So we decided, I mean, you know, this festival's 14 years old. I haven't been with them 14 years, but it was decided, and I support this decision. That
I knew we'd get a clench fist out of you at some point. There we go. I'm happy now.
That May Day would be in the title to remind people that there are workers not only here in the U.S. but all over the world, that we're all workers, and that we all celebrate workers on this one day, and to acknowledge that. So that was one of the reasons why.
And the film that we're showing on May Day, International Workers' Day, the real Labor Day, is Cesar's Last Fast. Do we have a clip?
We have a clip of that. Maybe we can see that, Ken, if you would please. We get the trailer for Cesar's Last Fast. We'll take a look at that. I've got a gizmo here that's going to allow us to listen to it.
Around-the-clock medical watch has been ordered for Cesar Chavez, head of the United Farm Workers Union. He has been on a fast protesting the use of pesticides.
The Farm Workers Union blames pesticides used on the grapes as the cause of cancer and other health disorders such as birth defects and miscarriages.
This man refuses to eat so that all of us can continue to eat and our children continue to eat with health and well-being.
The average life expectancy of a farm worker is somewhere around 49 years.
The only way the farm workers were going to be able to get any type of improvement in their working conditions had to be through a labor organization. There was just no other way.
Picket lines have been put around supermarkets in 23 major cities, and the boycott has received wide political support.
You cannot oppress the people who are not afraid anymore.
Hey, who do you want in Russia? Who do you got in China? You stink, you smell, you're a lousy bunch of commies.
It's a paid damn plan to come and beat the hell out of us. It's not difference of opinion.
Today is day 30 of Cesar Chavez's water fast. Today he's lost approximately 30 pounds, which is about 17% of his body weight. We are getting to a critical point of his fast here.
About all we can do as doctors is give him the facts in terms of permanent damage or even death.
Once social change begins, it cannot be reversed.
And there we go. Jeffrey, comment on that?
Right. This is a very powerful film, Cesar's Last Fast, which we are showing on May 1st, International Workers' Day. This is the one event we are doing in Watsonville. And it's going to be at the Cabrillo College Watsonville campus there, 7 o'clock in the evening on Friday, May 1st. And what people remember about Cesar Chavez and the United Farm Workers Union is the grape boycott and the lettuce boycott. And not too many people remember that his focus toward the end of his life was the poisonings of the farm workers in the fields because of the extensive pesticide use. And then the farm workers would have pesticide residue on their clothes and go home, and there was a documented really high incidence of birth defects and things like that among farm worker families. And so he engaged in this 36-day fast, water-only fast, to bring attention to the improper use of pesticides and the need for safer chemicals and more notification and training and so forth. And so, you know, his fast brought a lot of attention to it, but it didn't solve the problem. And that was, what, 20 years ago or so. And today, there are groups such as the Californians for Pesticide Reform, which is still working on the very same issue. We are having, speaking at that event, Mark Weller, who works for the California Pesticide Reform in conjunction with the Monterey Bay Central Labor Council, and he's going to be speaking on the issue today about pesticide spraying within 100 feet of schools. And are we surprised that the schools that are most impacted by this pesticide drift happen to be mostly Latino children more than white children?
Right.
And that film's going to be shown in Watsonville at the Cabrillo campus.
And you were saying something about May Day in the title?
Yes, and the just highlighting the fact that it being International Workers' Day was why we chose for it to be in the title. And so to celebrate, we're showing this film and at Cabrillo in Watsonville, hosted by Pajaro Valley Federation of Teachers.
Right, and that film actually, it's mostly in English, but it is going to be shown with Spanish subtitles. So I know there's a lot of people who really relate to Cesar Chavez and for whom English is not their first language, and so this film will be accessible to them as well.
Oh, we are going to have a
The
call.
Bat Phone.
Welcome to Voices from the Village. What's your question?
This is Tom Quinn. Is Gail Williams still there? Are they still doing the TV show?
Yes, we are.
Can I come in?
Oh, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, hold on. Oh, there you go. Well, see,
well.
we're live. Isn't that wonderful? You know, we have, what strikes me is that, number one, people don't realize that Cesar Chavez, at the end of his life, did a lot of work about the pesticides. And secondarily, particularly with May Day and the appropriateness of having films like this, I had the opportunity years ago to be in Europe on a May Day. And student worker solidarity there is the bedrock of activist politics of all kinds.
Right.
And yet here in this country, and as Camille knows from being an activist over the years, we've had a very difficult time getting, well, more so in the more distant past than the present, because I think labor has been very supportive for social and economic justice movements in Santa Cruz in recent times. But when I was quite a bit younger, there was a lot of animosity between students and workers, and I'm hoping that events like this, films like this, ideas like this will bring more solidarity between students and workers and be able to show that they do have many, many common goals.
Right. In the 1950s, in the early 50s, the labor movement in the United States was very strong. 1 out of every 3 working people was a member of a labor union. We had a union density of in mid 30%. I heard recently that, and now it's down to about 8% of working people are in labor unions. I heard that someone in Canada was complaining that their labor density was now down to 30%.
The labor unions that are left, that are strong, are in the public sector. So teachers and our, like I said, our professors.
SEIU here in Santa Cruz, a very strong, bold action union.
But they're really quite under attack. So what you're saying earlier about the connection with the students and the labor movement is important because, for example, I think the teachers seeing themselves as part of a labor movement is important because, you know, they're with our children. They have a sense of identity that people who are in professions can also be organized in labor to get the best opportunity for you know, our biggest saying is student learning, our labor conditions affect student learning. So that's a huge thing that happens in the labor movement. Now, to tie the Cesar Chavez movement to another film we're showing, the Salinas Project, which will be shown only in Monterey County, but it's an interesting film because it looks at Salinas from the viewpoint of 4 young people and how they managed to make a life and come, in a sense, not out of, but because they could return to their community. But the Alicel community of Salinas is the East Salinas community where the pesticide is right, you know, near the schools. It's the densest population east of the Mississippi, believe it or not. It's just an area that needs a lot of support. And what the film really starts with is how the media portrays Salinas and how the people who live there have a different feel and pride in what's going on. So it really points out that for workers who, and a lot of them are farm workers, for them to have a sense of pride in the work that they actually do, and then to recognize how they're really focused on their children having an education. So we're also showing the film at CSUMB because actually one of the people they follow in the film makes their way to CSUMB, which is exciting. But we're also going to be, the Salinas premiere of the film will be in the National Steinbeck Center on the April 27th at 7.
Excellent.
So we're excited about that because we can support the filmmaker, Carolyn Brown. She's going to come out from Washington, D.C. and be part of our film festival. So it's exciting when we get like premieres of films and we can really promote the kind of films that are, in this case, about our own community.
Of course,
But you know, how do we get that into the public? And we're doing that. It's great.
And before we leave the subject of labor and labor unions, now Jeffrey, longtime member and worker with the SEIU here in town.
Right.
And I'm interested in this, on May Day in Salinas, they're going to have a What the Hell is a Labor Union, and presumably they're also having it here.
Yeah,
Tell us a little bit about that. I mean, what the hell is a labor union?
Yeah, that's the question, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So this is made by a filmmaker, and this is actually going to be a world premiere of this
really?
film.
Well,
He
there
was
you
a
go.
film student,
Okay.
and this was his project. And he is actually a member of been a member of 3 different unions in his life. So it's a little tongue-in-cheek, saying, what the hell is a labor union? He certainly knows, but he's presenting it as to an audience as though, well, somebody doesn't know why we would want a labor union, or why a labor union is necessary. And he's focusing, because he lived in the Los Angeles area, as an example, a case study, he looked around to see, well, what union was active, and it was Unite Here, which is the hotel and restaurant workers. And they had campaigns at Marriott and at Disneyland and a couple other places during that period of time. And he was noticing, wow, they can get a lot of people out and to support each other for better working conditions. And these are generally pretty low-wage workers with minimal benefits. And so he could see that by sticking together, these people were able to actually get much better contracts in their campaigns with the employers. We've invited members of the Hotel and Restaurant Workers Union locally to come to that showing to speak about what the conditions are right here. For example, we had a very elongated contract negotiation process at the Dream Inn. I haven't heard recently. I think there's been some movement. Maybe the contract is about to be settled.
Also, the filmmaker will be there for this.
Right,
one,
yes,
correct?
for the world premiere. He's bringing his 75-year-old mother to the world premiere as well. Also, joining us at that event will be Howard Kaler, who is a longshoreman. He's retired member of the Longshoremen's Union, and he was very active in the 70s and 80s, relating to the Amandla film. People in South Africa were singing to keep up their spirit so they could fight this horrible segregation called apartheid. And the solidarity, there was worldwide solidarity. There was a lot of divestment movement divestment from South Africa, and also the Longshore Union refused to unload ships from South Africa. That was their way of protesting, bringing attention to this. And Howard Kaler was one of the people who organized those strikes that refused to unload cargo. So he's got a pretty radical perspective on how to actively show solidarity among working people, on a worldwide basis.
That film, What the Hell is a Labor Union? I mean, just the title alone really speaks to why we do the film festival in the first place. A lot of people have forgotten or don't feel like unions or collective bargaining or solidarity is relevant or has any place in the workplace today. And if you ask people if they think a union is important, they sometimes they say no, and it's kind of has this "what have you done for me lately" attitude. But at the same time, if you ask someone if they care about wages, if they care about benefits, if they care about safety at work, if they care about discrimination or anything that, or having a weekend or a 40-hour work week. Anything that is important to everyone as workers, we can agree on how we want to be treated at work, and the status quo that we have now really is a result of years of struggle that we'd like people to remember and know that there's still work to be done, and it's important to remember.
And I think that this does appropriately resonate in Santa Cruz because I think we do have a strong labor presence here. The SEIU, the Long-Term Care Workers Union, AFSCME on campus. I know as a city council candidate in 2010 and 2012 that labor union endorsements here in town are very important. And I think that there are the majority of city workers, I'm guessing, are unionized, either through the SEIU or others. Right. And so I think in Santa Cruz there is a consciousness of what labor unions can do for workers. There is a consciousness about the living wage or the minimum wage and those kinds of things.
From a political perspective, but from Joe Blow worker who maybe works downtown or a student at UCSC who is going to be going into the workforce, I don't know that everyone has that perspective of how important or has the same reverence for union opinion as
absolutely
as others.
Camille was talking about how our festival was founded, and I was involved in the beginning of the festival 14 years ago. And our idea was, well, we want to teach, present some of the labor history to our own union members. Because it's not just the average worker who's not a member of labor union. There's plenty of a lack of knowledge even among members of unions who don't really understand the history and the need for being in a union. Now, so we set up the film. We decided to show films to offer to our union members, and realized, well, we could share it with the community as well.
And again, appropriately, I think that it's emphasized in your brochure, because not only are you listing the films, the venues and whatnot, but you have end poverty wages of 15 per hour minimum wage. There's David Winters, a Unionist of the Year. Those things are things that we should be either advocating for or celebrating in Santa Cruz. Right. And so this film festival draws attention to that, gives people an opportunity to do that. Jennifer, you were mentioning earlier, we were talking about CSUMB, and there's a teachers union there. Are you a member of that?
So California Faculty Association.
So now you are very active with them, or
Yes, I was, for 3 years, I was like what we would call a shop steward, but it was being the person on the whole campus that looked at the grievances. And my husband is in a union too, and he's a shop steward, so we have a union family, and we just,
there you go.
It's a perspective, because when you get involved in it, you realize the importance. I often talk to people across the country who are looking at the fact that at the college level, most of our faculty, 75% across the country, are adjunct or part-time. And with that, many are receiving very low incomes, and we would think they wouldn't be because of their education and the nature of their work, but it's true. But I can say that because of the union embracing the part-timers in our CSU system, we have a much better opportunity in terms of benefits and everything, because the union has advocated for those part-timers that are within the system. So you can look at any work area, and you can see that you're going to have a higher wages. You're going to have things that have been developed because you really have the union as the advocate for the people. And I know, some people don't recognize that, but the more we can get people to understand that, like you said in our brochure, we've got this the 4 for 15, which is coming up soon this week. People are advocating for a minimum wage of $15 an hour. So all those kind of issues, but to recognize that unions aren't just working for the people's own salary. They're looking at this broader picture.
Absolutely.
That social justice, really connects to it, and that's why I think the film series sometimes say, well, is that really a labor film? There's a connection that people who are in the workforce, make with, like, the pesticide issue for farm workers. Those kind of crossover issues are really important. And at our, university level, when you're thinking about teachers or university professors, some of them might say, oh, why would I be in a union? But through experience, you recognize that it's the way to make sure we don't, actually go backwards in the kind of privatization that's happening in education. where we're losing the opportunity for a union to represent people in their workforce. So it's important.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, part of that, you're talking about always trying to move ahead and make gains, improve lives, and every time the working people manage to get some gain, it's not like, oh, well, great, now we can relax and work on something else, because there are forces that try to erode any of those gains or benefits at all times. And one of those is just the general understanding of unions. We were talking about how in the 50s, a lot of people were members of unions, and unions were pretty strong politically and culturally, and not so much now. And so, you know, the unions don't own any of the media outlets, and so we're not getting very good coverage of what the union benefits are. For example, one of them, you know, we have pretty much eliminated child labor in the United States, although not entirely. And there are a couple of films here. The first one of them is The Dark Side of Chocolate, and that's on the Saturday night, April 25th.
Why don't we show the trailer for that, and perhaps
just
we can
a
talk
minute.
about that in a moment.
Yeah, and the other one also on the following Saturday night, Stolen Childhood. These are both about child labor. And, you know, there's plenty of films. Yeah, what would make a labor film that we'd want to show in the Labor Film Festival? There's plenty of films showing how terrible work is and conditions are in sweatshops, you know, and they're pretty depressing. But we like to show films maybe showing what the realities are and what people are doing about it, what working people are doing, working together to change conditions. And so that's the case on both of these films. This is also an example of another organization linking up with ReelWork. These two films are brought to us by the Free Thought video series,
I saw that. Yeah, I was
which
wondering
Paul
about
Franklin
that.
has been running every Saturday night at the Quaker Meeting House all year long. And he's got a website which lists, you know, all the films. And these happen to be two that we had shown in previous years in ReelWork, and he's brought them back, and they're great films. And, you know, terrible conditions, but giving you a hopeful message about what can be done about it. The second one, Stolen Childhood, is about child labor in a lot of places, including in the United States. It's not gone here entirely.
Of course.
But we have the clip for The Dark Side of
Why don't we
Chocolate.
see The Dark Side of Chocolate now? We'll get that up here and take a look. Take a little look.
Everybody loves chocolate. We eat more than 3 million tons a year. But behind the sweet taste, there is a dark side. We've gone undercover with hidden cameras and assumed identities. We expose how African children as young as 8 years of age are smuggled across the border and used illegally in the chocolate industry. The dark side of chocolate. The true story of how your chocolate is produced.
And getting back to what we're talking about, I came to this understanding during the Occupy when we were so supported by labor unions, and I didn't really understand their engagement on social justice issues until then. And I came to appreciate what they were doing, you know, more than just collective bargaining, more than just raising laborers' wages. They were really engaged on the challenging social issues of the time, so it's very important. But tell us a little bit about what we've just seen here, The Dark Side of Chocolate.
Right, well, this is a film about conditions in Ivory Coast, where a lot of the chocolate that we eat here comes from. And, you know, child labor there is quite common.
And this isn't special chocolate coming from the Ivory, special, you know, high cacao content. This is Nestle and Hershey and industries that, you know, produce mass amounts and get their supply.
So there are now movements to have fair trade, you know, a lot of governments involved in a lot of free trade arrangements, which maybe are going to undercut labor benefits and environmental laws. But fair trade is an attempt to make sure that, you know, have some sort of certifying organization to make sure that the conditions under which the product is produced
and we do hear that, and I have heard it around town at some of the coffee shops and this and that. So we're fair trade, and then you hear it on campus and whatnot. But you have something you'd like to add about that, Camille?
Well, I mean, the connection between where we get our food and you know, we believe that there isn't child labor going on anymore in the United States, but these are, you know, U.S.-based companies that are using child labor in other countries to get you know, food and products here, and so it's important to acknowledge that's happening.
Right. So there are a couple of other film events also relating to food. One of them is from Brazil, called Soil Struggle and Justice.
I saw that, yeah.
And that's comes out of a landless workers movement. There's a lot of idle land and a lot of landless peasants. And so what this organization has done, the agrarian reform law in Brazil is if the land is idle, it's, you know, you can go squat on it. And through a certain process, you can actually gain title to it if you improve it.
Right.
So this movement has settled, you know, thousands and thousands of people on land, and in this particular case, the workers formed a cooperative, and the soil was really in terrible shape because it had been not taken care of by the corporation before, and so they decided to use agroecology techniques to really build up the soil, and that way they didn't have to use pesticides. I mean, they're thinking about their own families and their children living in the community. They didn't want to use the pesticides that had been used before. So they're using agroecology techniques, and probably some techniques that had been developed right here at UCSC, because the agroecology program does have a lot of linkages
and
to
I
Latin
see this is
America.
hosted by Charlotte Casey in the brochure, a San Jose peace activist who lived in Brazil from 1966 to 68.
She's going to be our speaker, very familiar with the movement, the landless workers movement. At the Peace and Justice Center, that's our film showing in San Jose this year. We're also showing that on Saturday, May 2nd at the Live Oak Grange, hosted by the United Nations Association.
Absolutely, here.
Yeah. And another film about food is called Food Chains. We actually have a clip on that one, I believe.
Would you like to see that? Maybe we discuss that. Let's see that if we can, please. Food Chains.
We know our economy is stronger when we reward an honest day's work with honest wages. Let's declare that in the wealthiest nation on earth, no one who works full-time should have to live in poverty.
Everybody should be concerned with where our food comes from and who picks it.
To live hungry while you are working, that's not a dignified way of living.
The defendants have been accused of beating them, locking them inside trailers, chaining them to a pole. These abuses are un-American, they are unacceptable, and they must stop.
The history of farm labor in the United States is a history of exploitation.
These people have suffered tremendously and grown much more slowly economically than any other segment of our society.
If we cannot win this fight, we have lost the soul of America.
I think the entire supermarket business goes out of its way so that you're not reminded of where your food came from.
If you want to make change, you need to look at the people at the very top.
we became a little problem for the big corporations.
Farm workers in Florida place the responsibility of fair wages and conditions for workers on the big buyers of tomatoes rather than the farmers.
What we want is to establish change.
I still believe agriculture is the backbone of America. You've got to pay attention to the labor force.
Most people have no idea that they're connected to this system every time they buy fresh fruits and vegetables. If a handful of companies decided that they wanted to eliminate poverty among farm workers, it could happen very, very quickly.
And again, very powerful visuals.
Right. The inspiration for this film, Food Chains, was a group of southern Florida farm workers, mostly growing tomatoes, who they tried to bargain with, called the Immokalee Workers, Coalition of Immokalee Workers. And they tried to bargain with the farmers, hey, we can't live on the pennies you're giving us for picking all these tomatoes. And the farmers would say, well, that's the market, we don't have any choice. So they had this novel idea of how to negotiate, and they sort of leapfrogged the farmers and went to the fast food chains and to the supermarket chains and had a campaign, fair food campaign, saying if you just pay a penny a pound more for your tomatoes, that makes a huge difference in the wage and benefit that the workers can get. And so this film goes into a lot of what's behind, you saw in the trailer, a lot of what's behind the pretty display in the shelves about what it takes in terms of human sweat and effort and conditions to produce our food.
And one of the other movies films we wanted to mention was Women Behind Bars, and our good friend Willow Katz will be there speaking. And
unfortunately, she had to.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
She had to cancel out, but there will be some
fierce
other
fighter for prison reform, and if you ever go to any rally anywhere, Willow is there. But
she was the inspiration for having this event. There's several films that are going to be shown about prison conditions today. And so it's very interesting how that fits in with the Labor Film Festival. I mean, there's people who work at the prison, the prison guards. Also, the people who are locked up, they're from the working class. They're working people who are getting locked up.
So other than Pride, you were mentioning that at the top of the show, is there any other film on this in the catalog that you're particularly interested in, you want to really tell people about?
Absolutely. In addition to, celebrating International Workers' Day, which is May Day, May 1st, we also really like to recognize that April 28th is Worker Memorial Day, and it's a day to honor people who have died. And we are showing a very special film called The Day's Work, and it is about a young man, his name is actually Day, and he died his first day of work.
My goodness.
But as 18 years old, was it?
Oh, he was 21.
21-year-old young man who died on his very first day of work from a work accident.
Oh, brother.
So another a day that's not necessarily recognized a lot in the United States, but we always like to remember people that we've lost and acknowledge that day.
And again, that's a world premiere of that film.
Oh, my.
And the filmmaker will be attending to speak and be involved in the discussion afterwards.
And Jennifer, a film through the catalog, the festival that particularly catches your interest?
We should mention that we always have a connection with the veterans and the
veterans. Absolutely, thank you. Yeah.
And to really look at through the eyes of veterans and the eyes of the armed forces, the issues of work, and there's always an interesting film that has to do with that. This year it's about drones.
Absolutely.
So I think people are going to really enjoy, I don't know if that's the right word, but get a lot out of this because we're very concerned about what's happening with the unmanned drones and how it affects the war, but also looking behind the scenes at who's involved in those. So.
And I will hasten to add that we were mentioning our good friend Daniel Young, who's a member of your review committee, and the Motto Post and Bob Patton. Those folks have always been behind all of the social and economic advocacy, activism in Santa Cruz, in my experience. And my experience doesn't go back 100 years like some. But in the last 10 or 12 years that I've been very active in this, you can always count on those folks coming out, and we were very much behind them when they were fighting to get back in their building. So I'm delighted that they're having something there.
And this, this film, like you said, is going to be shown at the Veterans Hall.
Right.
It's called Unmanned, and it's going to be shown.
Yeah, 7 o'clock on Monday, April 27th. Most of the films are at 7 o'clock, but you know, people can check our website, www.realwork.org. I think it's posted on the
And they should know, of course, that this is admission, voluntary donation at the door. So if you can't afford to...
Right, and we're able to do that because on the website and also on the program, we have a long list of our sponsors, our contributors. Probably 24 labor unions contribute money, and also some other community organizations, in addition to various we do get some in-kind donations. For example, the printing of the program is partially donated by community printers, and community television right here is one of our major sponsors.
Is it my understanding that it's your wife?
She's the designer. She's a graphic designer.
Okay, let's mention her.
Tony.
This beautiful brochure here.
Thank you, Tony.
That you see. Yes, it's wonderful and informative and nicely laid out. You know, we have an extra couple of minutes here. Maybe
well, I wanted to mention that May Day, International Workers' Day, the film that we're showing, Caesar's Last Fast, is also part of the Global Labor Film Festival, which is something we participate in. So believe it or not, we are not the only labor film festival in the United States or in the world. And there is an event that happens in DC in October where different representatives from different film festivals, labor film festivals throughout the world gather and have a conference. And we agreed to that all of us, it's not just...
You went last year, right?
I went 2 years ago. And we, there's a wonderful festival in San Francisco, Labor Fest, that happens. But also there's the DC Labor Film Fest. At this particular conference were representatives from Turkey and from South Africa, from Montana, and us from Santa Cruz. And everyone agrees to show a film in the month of May and post it on the Global Labor Film Festival website. And so it's a film festival happening throughout the world that we're able to participate in.
Now, does that reflect the fact that those locations you're talking about, those cities, are strong union areas, or is it just coincidental that, for instance, it's a wonderful festival, there's so much to learn, so much to see, so much to absorb, and it resonates here in Santa Cruz, is because we are a relatively strong, in my view anyway, union town?
Well, I think it has to do, there's some other coincidences, there has to be a few people who are really inspired to do the work to make the festival happen.
Right.
So there are a lot more strong union towns besides the dozen or so worldwide that host film festivals.
But perhaps a reflection of the climate and the acknowledgement of the need to highlight these kinds of issues. And activists are hiding everywhere among us, and the more sort of productions like this that are put on here and throughout the world, the more comfortable people are.
And filmmakers are hiding.
Right.
Because I think both our CSUMB, we have a filmmaking department, and we have it at UC Santa Cruz. And, we would love to have young filmmakers make more films about labor. There are stories to be told, and I think there'll be, something we can look at as more filmmakers, catch on to
Is this
making films.
something that's discussed while you're hosting some of these films, the kind of encouraging people to make more films, not necessarily just to come and look and enjoy and learn, but to actually
we've had student films over the years, but we've also had the filmmakers come speak, and we had a couple times when the filmmakers were showing like what they call a rough cut, and we actually got to give some feedback to the filmmaker.
Wonderful.
It was really interesting, and I think the filmmakers want to connect with an audience. They're really quite fascinating, I think, for us to connect with the filmmakers and see through their eyes what they're trying to bring across, because they could tell a story in different ways, and often it's very artful in the sense that it's making us think, not just telling the story, but making us think and making us jump into some kind of action.
Well, that's a wonderful way to wind up our show. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here. And once again, it's a ReelWork 2015 May Day Labor Film Festival, beginning a week from tonight and running through May 3rd. Wonderful films. You can get a brochure and take a look at it and select any or all of these. But thank you, Camille, for your work in the community and for being here with us tonight. Jeffrey Smedberg, thank you so much. And Dr. Jennifer Colby, thank you so much. Everyone, this has been Steve Pleich for Voices from the Village, and on behalf of Charlie and Betsy Phillips, our producers, everybody behind the cameras and in the engineering booth, thanks so much, and we'll see you next time on Voices from the Village. Good night.